So you may have seen the debate last night between Vice President Harris and former President Donald Trump. They talk about Israel, and Harris is asked about what she wants to see in terms of the Israel-Hamas war, and not just now, but moving forward. And I want to react to her words. This is not about getting party political. This is just simply about reacting to her words and having moral clarity on an issue which I think there is far too much moral confusion about. So let's watch and then I'll react.
Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel.
So I'd like to pick up on this because she's right in obviously having the clarity that this started on October 7th and talks about what Hamas did, and brings up the importance of supporting Israel. But then she gets into being, I think, very morally clouded when she talks about the war. So she says, first of all, she says, too many lives have been lost. Now, of course, all war, all life lost is a tragedy. There shouldn't need to be war, but there is war, and sometimes war is moral, just, and necessary. You say too many lives have been lost. Well, Hamas haven't been destroyed yet. And we have 40,000 dead. Everyone says 40,000 Palestinians dead. How many of those are Hamas? And when you actually do the digging, you find out that Israel has a nearly 1-to-1 ratio of combatant to non-combatant killed. I'm not even going to call non-combatants civilians, because many people who might have been killed or are non-combatants are still, a lot of them are still complicit with Hamas, even if they're not fighting. If you're teaching people as a school teacher to be martyrs and telling them to go on jihad, if you're someone that's hiding weapons or Hamas terror tunnels in your home or in your house, if you're an active participant in helping or hiding hostages, are you just an innocent civilian? So it's much more blurry than that, but I'm saying even then, Israel has the lowest ratio in the history of modern urban warfare. And so if you're saying then, well, too many have died, well, what would be acceptable to you? There's thousands more Hamas terrorists that need to be killed. And if you're saying that Israel has to have a perfect ratio, basically, it's impossible. Unless you want to see so many Israelis slaughtered that no other country would do that. When I say Israelis, I mean Israeli soldiers. Why should Israeli soldiers have to die on the altar of protecting Hamas and a population that majority supports October 7th still, according to polling, recent polling done, reported by Reuters. So, you know, when America was fighting in Afghanistan or Iraq, or even if you go back to Korea, the civilian to combatant ratio was far higher. You'd have around maybe 4 civilians killed for every 1 combatant killed. So when you say too many have died, of course, all war and all suffering and all pain and death is tragic, but what more can Israel do than that? This is something I simply don't understand. And then she says, I support Israel's right to defend herself, but Israel still has a problem of Hamas on her doorstep. And she then says the war must end immediately. We need an immediate ceasefire. She didn't say the war must end. We all want the war to end. But she said immediately, and a ceasefire. No, that's not what's acceptable. What's acceptable is the war ending when Hamas are destroyed, when the threat is destroyed. So you ensure never again can there be an October 7th repeat. So I don't understand how you can just say end the war right now. Ceasefire now. No, don't ceasefire now. Destroy Hamas. And maybe, yes, do it quicker if you can. But this notion of just destroying, having a ceasefire while leaving Hamas in place is simply unacceptable. Then we talk about, preventing October 7th by destroying Hamas. She then goes on to talk about two states. Now, I know that many people support a two-state solution, but let's be clear. Rewarding Hamas right now, rewarding the Arabs who majority support October 7th in Gaza and Judea and Samaria by saying we're going to get back on to talking about a two-state solution. Right now, you should be talking about de-radicalization, ending their century-long war trying to destroy the Jewish state. If you then start talking about we'll have a Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank as it's sometimes known, and Gaza, I can tell you what will happen immediately if Israel pulls out. You'll have Hamas take control immediately of Judea and Samaria, and October 7th will pale in comparison. The false premise that Harris is indulging in is that all of this just comes down to a legitimate grievance of wanting statehood by the Arabs or the Palestinians that they describe themselves as. I say describe themselves as rather than as they actually are, because in 1948, if the Arabs would have won the war against the Jews, against Israel, there wouldn't be a Palestinian state. The Arabs have consistently rejected offers of a Palestinian state, even when the Jews would just have a tiny little bit in the north, which was first proposed in the 1930s. What would have happened in 48 was you'd have had Jordan would take a chunk, Egypt would take a chunk, Lebanon would take a chunk, Syria. There would be no Palestinian state, it just wouldn't be controlled by Jews, and that's the problem. This is not about a legitimate grievance, this century war between Israel and the Arabs. It's about not accepting the Jewish people's right to sovereignty, to re-establishing their ancient homeland. And that is the root of the issue. So talking now about we're going to get back onto a two-state solution, a two-state solution needs to be off the table because it's, first of all, there never was a desire for an Arab state. There's just a desire to get rid of the Jews. And therefore, if that's the case, and there really is no actual desire for self-determination, they'd be happy to be part of another Arab empire or territory or whatever. And then on top of that, this really is Jewish territory, Judea and Samaria, Gaza, and even according to international law, by the way. So then, actually, we have to move forward with a different approach and say that this is going to be Jewish territory. Now, how we figure that out, many people have proposed different ways of dealing with that. And maybe it might even require some serious measures, which say if you don't accept the Jewish people's sovereignty over this territory, well, then you don't have a right to be here, or certainly to live in freedom here. Arabs fare far better in Israel than they do in any other country in the Middle East, any other Arab country, quite frankly. And so the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. So they need to act very differently moving forward. And so it's concerning to see the same old tunes say it. But in fairness, a lot of people are saying the same old tunes. And I think it is folly. They were saying this, we showed a clip just yesterday on JTV of people saying before the 2005 disengagement from Gaza, it's going to be fine, stop worrying, stop fear-mongering, saying it'll become an axis of terror and all that, because that clearly is a fantasy. And so people that are against the two-state solution are described and characterized as extremists and ideologues. I would say actually those that keep pushing for a two-state solution are the extremists and the ideologues, because they are not grounded in reality. the truth is, the reality is, that offering them, the Arabs, statehood or autonomy just delivers bloodshed, intifada, war, terrorism, genocide. Because you have to understand that their desire is not for self-determination and a statehood. Their desire is to kill off the Jewish state. Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.